Hey there, guys. All right, today we are back with a great war. And now, after today, we will just be one episode away. This is the Great War, week 224, Revolution in Germany, and an armistice in Austria. If you guys can hear any sort of noise happening in the background, that is my AC unit that is in my window. And if you see me sweating, it's because I just put it in like 2 minutes before starting to record today because it's hot today. I'm suffering. I'm dying. I do not do well in the heat. Also, that's why my hair is just a fucking shit show right now because it got all sweaty. And yeah, anyways, God, I hate when I hate being sweaty. I used to do I go to the gym, but I used to do sports in high school. I did two sports like at the same time. I did track and like martial arts. And I had no problem sweating back then. Getting old, man, it sucks. I've become way less tolerant of heat and sweatiness. Makes me feel gross and icky and sticky. Anyways, y'all didn't need to know that, but I'm sharing it. I shared it anyway. Anyways, let's go ahead and just dive straight into this.
What happens this week? Well, Austria-Hungary signs an armistice with the Allies, leaving Germany alone in the fight. If you think that was
I mean, let's be honest here. They've kind of been fighting this war by themselves the entire fucking time.
bad enough for Germany, this week also sees revolution in Germany.
Dun dun dun. I wonder how much they're gonna talk about the revolution because that it is hard. At least in my experience with what I remember with World War One in public school back in the day, we never talked about the revolution in Germany. I don't even think I knew a revolution happened in Germany in World War One until maybe AP European history, like, yeah, and even then it was very brief, mainly because in AP classes you don't got much time once you reach the 20th century before the big test you have to take in those classes. So we kind of ran right through it. Um, but yeah, it was like a brief mention, like, yeah, Germans got upset and they deposed their Kaiser. That's it. Armistice signed 1 week later. Kind of how it was. At least that's how I remember it.
I'm Indy Nidell. Welcome to the Great War. Last week, the Ottoman Empire signed an armistice, and for them, the active war was over. The Italian offensive against Austria-Hungary continues, taking chunks of ground and tens of thousands of prisoners, even as that empire dissolves into new nations. Emperor Karl has asked for an armistice, but has yet to get one. But he finally does this week. On the 3rd, the Allies advance on the whole Italian front before signing an armistice. Hostilities end at noon on the 4th. The Italians tried to take as much land as possible before this happened, including Trento on the 1st and Trieste on the 3rd, the latter taken by amphibious assault. By the time the armistice was signed, some 300,000 troops from Austro-Hungarian lands became prisoners of war. The Italian army was also advancing in Albania, and the armistice...
How do you even... one thing I feel like we also often overlook, how the fuck do they manage that many prisoners of war? Like, we're talking hundreds, if not into the millions. Hundreds of thousands, if not into the millions, right? How the fuck do you deal with that?
demanded Austrian demobilization, so southern Germany was now completely exposed. The Central Powers' unity collapsed with disconcerting speed. Bulgaria's surrender deprived the Central Powers of 14 combat divisions, enabling the Allies to liberate Serbia and advance to the Danube. Severing the Danube shipping route and cutting overland communication prevented Germany from supplying Turkey. And as the best Turkish units were in the Caucasus...
Yeah, why the... That the Ottomans just... Pasha's stupidity there. Like, I don't... so stupid.
Constantinople lay exposed. Romanian oil was also vulnerable. The more so as Romania had never fully disarmed and was now poised to rejoin the Allies. The Hungarian portion of the Habsburg monarchy faced invasion from both this direction and from Serbia, and in late October, the Budapest government announced the withdrawal of its forces from the Italian front. For the Central Powers, the implications of Bulgaria's surrender were all bad. Looking back, it seems that Hindenburg and Ludendorff were right when they said the war was lost when the Macedonian front was broken. And this is not so much saying that the Allies should have focused on the smaller fronts. The breakthrough on that front had such impact because it came during Ferdinand Foch's huge offensive, and after 2 solid months of German defeats and setbacks. Indeed, the Bavarian plenipotentiary at the OHL suspected the German High Command of using Bulgaria as a pretext for conceding defeat. Maybe so, but those attacks were still coming in the West. At the beginning of the week, the Canadians occupy Valenciennes. There is also an American attack on the Meuse, the 1st. This was a bit different from their early attacks. They'd made 3 artillery batteries from 14-inch battleship guns. Now railway mounted and firing from 40 kilometers away, their shells, over 600 kilos each, were insanely powerful. The Americans also used mustard gas for the first time, raining 41 tons of gas shells down on the Germans. Between these two things, the German artillery nearest them was almost completely destroyed. Low-flying planes machine-gunned the defenders as the American infantry advanced, while high-flying bombers hit communications, stores, and rallying points behind the lines. For the first time, the Americans completely broke through the German lines and the enemy fled. There was no possibility of the Germans even regrouping, let alone a counterattack. On the 4th, a great Anglo-French offensive on a 50-kilometer front begins, from east of Scheidt at Valenciennes to Guise-en-Oise, reaching to the east of Le Quesnoy, halfway through Mormal Forest, past Landrecy-en-Sambre and across the Sambre-Oise Canal. 10,000 prisoners are taken and 200 guns. That same day, the British attack on the Sambre Canal. Here, the poet Wilfred Owen, whom I've quoted several times, met his fate. Also on the 4th, the Allies plan new attacks for next week. The French will attack into Lorraine on the 14th. The Americans will join them. On the 5th, the British take Le Quesnoy and Mormal Forest. The French cross the Ardennes Canal, and from the 5th, and for the first time of the war, the Germans were in a general retreat. The next day, the Americans reached the Meuse River bank opposite Sedan. In the confusion of the advance, Douglas MacArthur is taken prisoner by his own side, brought in by American sentries who thought he was a German officer. You may laugh, but this was a real day of confusion because of the rapidity.
Hold on, let's take a look at that picture here of young MacArthur. I mean, no. He's got American eyes, though. That's an American face. Like, especially the eyes. The eyes are American. I could maybe see, like, the lower half of his face being a bit, I guess, kind of Germanesque. But no, I don't. How the fuck do you... Oh, okay.
By his own side, brought in by American sentries who thought he was a German officer. You may laugh, but this was a real day of confusion because of the rapidity of the advance, with conflicting orders, units marching into one another, and a rapidly growing and chronic shortage of supplies. I read in Martin Gilbert that in one division, horses were so scarce that men were harnessed to wagons to pull them to the front.
Oh, God.
But for all that, there was no denying the huge scale of the victory. Also, the Americans fighting this week showed they'd really learned some hard lessons. Their own internal appraisals had been seriously critical up to this point, but now wrote that infantry operations were vastly improved, as well as response speed and effectiveness, and, also importantly, speed of supply. On the 7th, the French and Americans threatened Charleville and Mézières, and that day, when the Americans occupy the heights opposite Sedan, they deny the Sedan-Mézières railway to the Germans. This was the American First Army's chief mission from the beginning, severing the Germans' last lateral railway. But I have to point out here, that though things were going great for the Allies in the field, they were still dying by the scores as well.
Yay.
133,000 French
Oh,
troops were killed, wounded, or missing in just October. Britain took 100,000 casualties that month.
damn.
There's something else at play here by
Wait,
now.
what about USA?
The British and French want to end the war as soon as possible out of the fear that if it continues, the Americans will be so dominant with all the men still flooding in that they will dictate peace terms.
USA. USA.
This is not entirely without merit. When American President Woodrow Wilson had been communicating with the Germans, he had not even consulted the Entente, and they had serious divisions on certain issues. How would trade work post-war? What about freedom of the seas? What would happen to the German colonies? The Allied generals had not, as it turned out, really read Wilson's 14 points. Still,
No
the
way.
peace, or at least armistice process, is proceeding. On the 6th, German armistice delegates leave Berlin for the West.
You know what's also validating about this series? You know how the entire internet and of course this is something that I have talked about numerous times before. It is something that is a problem also within the historian field. At least it was a problem when I was doing my thesis. And I'm sure this applies to the field, the wider field as well, is we have this problem of wanting to, for whatever reason, wanting to overcorrect, right? So to give an example from my thesis, which I've used before, Alfred the Great was very hyped up due to the Victorians. The Victorians fucking attributed a lot of stuff to him. And so then when a lot of the more modern Alfred the Great research and historiography started coming out, like 90s, 2000s, that's the stuff essentially that I read for my thesis. There was a swing of overcorrection of trying to, at least in my eyes, it was overcorrection, and I addressed this in my thesis from what I remember, of where, okay, yeah, the Victorians are wrong, but I also think that maybe we are swinging too much and trying to attribute too little to this person, because then, and then I brought in other sources that were like, hey, this seems to be the more likely thing here, the middle kind of option of where, yes, they're not wrong, but it does come across as, like, say, an overcorrection, or like, hey, this person isn't wrong in saying this thing, but they're also not correct, because if you shift your perspective to look at it this way, you can see how people would view it, that right, that sort of thing. And so we see that with World War One, where people do not, and there's certainly validity to not really wanting to attribute much to the Americans, because definitely by the time the war ends, the Americans really weren't there for that long. But they were, and I think we are looking at, when we do that, we are solely kind of looking at it from the past, and we aren't looking at what was being planned for the future of the war were it to last longer, right? And that's what essentially Indy is saying here. Had this war lasted longer, the Americans would have had a lot more influence in this, in the Treaty of Versailles. They would have had more, they were gaining more and more sway as time went on, because more and more Americans were coming in and getting shit done. Now, of course, to attribute the progress that the Allies are currently making towards the Americans would be wrong, right? Essentially, this is the culmination of years of fighting, and just finally the Germans having been put under too much strain. But it's a combination of things. But yeah, internet. Fuck you. The Americans were influential in World War One. It's just the war ended before the Americans could really actually be influential. So like, it's I feel like an overcorrection that we make. And of course, to attribute, you still don't want to attribute too much to the Americans, right? Because, like, again, Americans were only here fighting really for 1918. So, yeah. But, yeah, tangent.
Western Front. Allied Supreme Commander Ferdinand Foch receives them on the 7th at Retonde, 6 kilometers from Compiègne Forest, and refuses a request for a provisional armistice. Terms of armistice are to be accepted or refused by 11 a.m. on the 11th. Now, just to explain, you can't just cross the front lines and take a train to see Ferdinand Foch. The delegates crossed the lines near Cambrai by car and were taken on a long roundabout journey of the region. They did not know where they were going. The atmosphere was decidedly less than cordial. The German delegates are State Secretary and Center Party leader Matthias Erzberger, Count Alfred von Oberndorf, ex-foreign minister to Sofia, Detlev von Winterfeld, Naval Captain Ernst Vanselov, and a certain General von Gundel. Erzberger very reluctantly leads the delegation, so reluctantly that people were afraid he would not cross into the French lines. That's why von Gundel is there to replace him just in case. They are told that negotiations will take place in the forest of Compiègne. News of the arrival of German delegates on French soil sparked rumors that the war was already over. An American journalist telegraphed this rumor home from Brest, and that afternoon, the San Diego Sun ran the headline, "Peace, Fighting ends." Yep, in their haste, they misspelled fighting. Celebrations
USA.
began all over the States, and the great
Hoorah.
Enrico Caruso sang the Star-Spangled Banner from the window of his hotel in New York. The news was, in fact, reported all over the world the 7th, from Argentina to Australia, and crowds converged on the White House, calling for President Wilson to address them. He knew, of course, that this news could not be true, so he didn't come out. There were also those who knew that the war was not over, but were refusing to fight it. The German 3rd Naval Squadron had arrived in Kiel after naval sedition and mutiny caused Admiral Franz von Hipper to rescind his order for all-out battle with the British last week. Commander Hugo Kraft now ordered naval maneuvers in Heligoland Bight.
There's a part of me that is so curious how that all-out warfare with the British Navy would have gone. I'm just a morbid curiosity. How absolutely thrashed would the German high seas fleet have been, which has gotten their asses whooped? I want to know.
And when they went off without a hitch, he assumed he was master of his ship and had 47 sailors, who he thought the ringleaders of last week's insubordination, arrested. Sailors then got together and asked for their release, but they were ignored. That might not have been so wise. On the 3rd, 3,000 sailors from the squadron mutiny and raised the red banner and the slogan Frieden und Brot, peace and bread. When authorities try to suppress this, several mutineers are killed and over 24 injured, but it continues and even spreads. 20,000 garrison troops.
When you react violently to protests, it's going to spread. I don't understand I really don't understand the logic of power. The panic from people in power when people below them are protesting. It's like you react violently, you're just going to cause your own defeat, you moron.
Troops joined the mutineers. On the 5th, sailors in Lübeck and Travemünde joined the revolution, and those in Hamburg, Bremen, and Wilhelmshaven joined the following day. The Kaiser considers sending the army to retake Kiel, but he's talked out of it. Lenin comments, "Germany has caught fire, and Austria is burning out of control." German socialist leader Friedrich Ebert calls for the Kaiser's immediate abdication. Quartermaster General Wilhelm Groener returns from the front and says an armistice must be signed the latest by the 9th. His survey of the situation, based on his personal experiences of the past few days, was a grim one. The fleet was in mutiny, revolution was imminent, and the government authority had fallen so low that troops would refuse to fire on revolutionaries. The King of Bavaria flees, and a Bavarian Soviet Republic is declared at Munich by Kurt Eisner. German Chancellor Max von Baden issues a proclamation to Germans living abroad that Germany has been beaten. Late that evening, the 8th, Admiral von Hinze reached Spa to personally tell Kaiser Wilhelm that his navy, his beloved navy and the symbol of his pride, would no longer obey his orders. Germany has fallen apart. And here is one final note to round out the week. In the November 5th American senatorial elections, a Republican majority is returned. It is slim, just 2 seats, but the Senate is now in a position to deny or sabotage Democratic President Wilson's post-war negotiations should it choose to do so. And what a week it was. Austria signing an armistice, which does lead to an end to the fighting, but also an end to Habsburg rule, pretty much. A general German retreat and Allied advances in the West. Revolution sweeping across Germany and Germans at the table for armistice. 2 weeks ago, I quoted Lenin, again, saying that 3 months ago, people would have laughed at the idea of revolution in Germany. Well, the revolution is here, but trust me, no one is laughing. If you want to learn more about Austria,
Now is revolution in Germany. Armistice in Austria. The Great War, week 224. I have nothing to add here at the end. Join me next time when we finish the Great War series. The first ever to do it, bitches. You doubted me. You fucking doubted me. Don't doubt me. Don't you doubt me. Actually, honestly, I probably would have stopped the series if someone didn't leave a comment saying, you'll probably never finish this series. And then I was stubborn. I was like, fuck you, I'm going to finish it. So, here we are. I hope you guys enjoyed. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.